This video is now in session, and the Republican Party has changed their complete stance on policy. At this moment, the Republican Party has moved away from the economic policies that they used to implement from the Reagan era to the Trump era, and they're now moving into more of a party about culture and wokeness. So this is in light of the 2020 election, with Donald Trump constantly airing his grievances about the 2020 election and how he should have won it, and how he did win it, even though he did not. But the consequence of that is the Republican Party is no longer focusing on the economic policies that was implemented under the Trump presidency, and they're no longer actively talking about that anymore. Instead, what they're talking about is how Democrats are woke leftists. Instead, they're talking about how Democrats are socialists, and that they are trying to cancel everyone. And there is a good strategy to that, but it's also not really a sustainable strategy, because Republicans need to get two kinds of voters: Rust Belt voters and Sun Belt voters. If they focus primarily on social politics, on cultural politics, they're only going to get people from the Rust Belt. They're not going to get anyone from the Sun Belt, because the Sun Belt focuses more on economic policies. It focuses more on tax cuts. It focuses more on budgets, instead of focusing more on cancel culture and policing. So let's, I guess, examine this map, with Republicans either focusing on social issues or on economical issues. So with social issues, they're bound to get a lot of the Rust Belt. They'll probably get Michigan, Wisconsin, Iowa, Ohio, Pennsylvania, New Hampshire, and Maine 2nd District. Those are the states that they will do well in. But they will not do well in any other place. They won't do well in Virginia or North Carolina. Actually, they would do well in Florida, and yeah, they would do well in Florida, and in the short term, I guess they would still do fine in Texas. But for the rest of the states, they're not going to do well in any of these states. The most important of these states: Arizona, Georgia, and North Carolina. Those are three states that Republicans need in order to win any kind of election in the future. And if they're going to focus primarily on social issues, and if they're going to try to primarily portray the Democrats as a socialist party, it will eventually backfire on them, because just because of past precedent. We saw in the 2016 election how Hillary Clinton tried to get the Hispanic vote by portraying Trump as a radical, and he still won. But a lot of Hispanics went over to Hillary Clinton. Fast forward to 2020, and you see that for the most part, Trump, even though his policies were a little unorthodox, and his policies were a little more conservative, it wasn't really completely radical because of the filibuster in the Senate. So as a result, a lot of Hispanics in Florida moved over from Hillary Clinton over to Donald Trump, because they saw that Hillary Clinton was lying to them, and in addition, they're seeing that they're hearing that Trump is portraying the Democrats as a socialist party, so they're more inclined to vote for Trump than Biden. But once Biden is not able to pass his most radical agendas, supposedly radical socialist agenda, then you'll start to see a lot of those same voters move back to being Democratic, because of the lies that Donald Trump tried to place on the Democrats. And the fact that Donald Trump portrayed Democrats as socialist, and he actually got a lot of votes because of that, it's it's unfortunate, but it's true. Even though I would objectively say that the Democratic Party is not really a socialist party, but nonetheless, the Republican Party right now is focusing on culture matters, abortion. They're focusing on Yeah, they're focusing on abortion, police, Black Lives Matter movements. They're focusing on guns, how they need to protect their Second Amendment right, and those kinds of policies. They again do well in the Rust Belt, and for guns, they do well in Texas, but. It's overall in the grand picture of things, it's not good for Republicans because Democrats are in a much better position in the future to win elections. And that's because Democrats are starting to spread out their votes. Because of the pandemic, and I've already made a video on this, Democrats are moving to different states, more Republican states like Texas, and as well as Georgia, Arizona, even Idaho, Utah, these kinds of states that used to be ruby red Republican, and as a result, they're helping to turn these states blue. So it's something that's not happening on the Republican side. The Republicans are not moving from the rural area to the urban area. Most of them don't despise moving to the urban area, but not for Democrats. Democrats are actually moving to ex-urban areas. And along with that, they're bringing their politics with them, which means that they're going to help make states turn from red to purple to blue. Texas is an example of this, where there are voters from California who are moving over to Texas, and as a result, more specifically, I guess, Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, and Austin, and because of that, they're helping to make Texas blue. Texas is becoming narrower and narrower each election, and even though Republicans will most likely sign their restrictive voting law, it's still not going to do anything to prevent Democrats from voting in the long term because demographic shifts will catch up with the Republican Party. Republicans are at this moment trying to do short-term gains, which in politics is usually a better idea, but in this case, it might be to the detriment of the Republican Party in the future, with the Republican Party ingraining themselves on social issues. Meanwhile, for Democrats aren't entirely being moderate in terms of economical issues, but at least they do have economical issues rather than focusing primarily on social issues. And if you're comparing an economic policy to no policy, you're probably going to choose the economic policy. Even because that's really the only choice that you have. So that's really the sentiment that voters in the Sun Belt will most likely have in a couple of elections to come. Meanwhile, in the Rust Belt, Democrats don't really need the Rust Belt if they transition over to the Sun Belt, which is being aided by Republicans. And that actually also helps Democrats because the Rust Belt is losing in population. You can see here that Michigan has 15 instead of 16 electoral votes. Ohio has 17 instead of 18. Illinois has 19 instead of 20. So has Pennsylvania. And Minnesota was only just about able to keep its 10 electoral votes. It was very close to being to having only 9 electoral votes. So that's the state of politics at this current moment, and the policies that each party is bringing up. We'll probably continue to see Republicans being aided more by social issues when the Republican Party is increasingly being controlled by Tea Party conservatives and the QAnon representatives like Marjorie Taylor Greene. So that's the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you. This video is now adjourned, and I'll see you in the next one.